This is The Streets of Panic Park, which is book 12 in the Goosebumps HorrorLand series by RL Stine. Chapter 4. I covered my eyes with a trembling hand. I could hear other kids screaming. I heard sobs and cries of disbelief. Even with my eyes covered, I still saw Jillian's head with its brown hair flowing behind it. The dark, wide-open eyes, the mouth drooping open. No, 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 Carly Beth moaned by my side. I opened my eyes. I saw Sabrina bent over, puking on the floor. Abby and Julie were hugging each other tightly, tears pouring down their faces. I thought this trophy might get your attention, the menace said. It's a beauty, isn't it? All that lovely brown hair. He took Jillian's head from the shadow person. He gazed at it for a long moment. See, he said, turning back to us, I can do anything I want. Anything. Luke huddled close to me. He kept swallowing hard, trying not to puke. The menace raised Jillian's head by her hair. Think fast, he shouted, and he heaved the head at us. I screamed. Luke ducked. Robbie Schwartz caught the head. He uttered a cry and staggered back, his eyes bulged with horror. And then his expression changed as he got a closer look. Hey, he said. Hey, it's rubber. It's not real. Kids gasped in surprise. I let out a long sigh of relief. Only rubber? The menace laughed. April Fools, guys. Next time it will be real, he said. Maybe it'll be your ugly head. Luke wrapped his arm around my waist. His whole body was trembling. Why are you doing this? I shouted to the menace. Why don't you let us go home? Lizzie, where are your listening skills? He asked. I told you, I need to keep you here. I need you to survive the most terrifying horrors I can dream up. I need to collect your fear. He motioned to the shadow people guarding the entrance to the room. They floated forward like a fog rolling in. The air grew icy as they surrounded us. I began to shiver from the cold. A shade clapped a silvery bracelet on my wrist and snapped it shut. The bracelet pressed tightly into my skin. Well, what is this? I stammered. I heard the metallic snap of bracelets. Everyone was getting one. Don't panic, people, the menace said. At least don't panic yet. He laughed at his own joke, and the shadow people joined in, chuckling softly. The bracelets measure your fear, the menace said, and when you feel fear, they will start to heat up and tingle. Oh boy, so sweet. I can almost feel them tingling right now. Matt tugged hard at his bracelet, struggling to pull it off his wrist. I don't think you should try to pull the bracelets off, the menace said. You see, any hard tug and they will burn themselves into your flesh. The menace leaned forward over the podium. Go ahead, he said to Matt. Give it a try. I love the smell of barbecue, don't you? With a scowl, Matt let go of the bracelet. He balled his hands into fists but kept them down at his sides. That's better, the menace said. Let's get the show on the road, shall we, people? My whole body trembled as I gazed down the row of kids. Everyone looked pale and shaken. Robbie still held the rubber Jillian head tight in his hands. Carly Beth hugged Sabrina. Boone Dixon had his eyes shut. The menace turned to the door behind him. Bring out the fear meter, he shouted. I heard the rumble of something heavy, like furniture being moved. The rumble grew louder as someone wheeled the fear meter into the room. It looked like a grandfather clock, tall and narrow. The meter was wheeled in front of the stage, and then the worker pushing it stepped out from behind it, and everyone let out a startled gasp. We stared at his purple fur, the yellow horns poking up from his head. Byron. Chapter 5. Byron stepped back from the fear meter and nodded at the menace. He stared at us as he adjusted the straps of his overalls. Why did you trick us? Robbie yelled at the tall horror. We thought you were helping us, Carly Beth shouted. We thought you were on our side. You thought wrong, Byron replied. Are you all totally clueless? The menace said. Did you really think Byron was your friend? He lied to us like Jillian and Jackson did, Robbie scowled. He tossed the rubber head at Byron. It bounced off the horror's big chest and landed on the floor. Everyone started talking at once. Luke turned to me. They really thought Byron was their friend. He tricked them, I said. Now we're all caught in this trap. People, get a grip, the menace waved his hands to get us quiet. You aren't the only ones Byron fooled. He fooled all the horrors at Horrorland, too. They thought he was working with them to protect you. But he was my guy right from the start. Matt shook his head. I trusted you, Byron, he muttered. You gave me that Panic Park keycard. I thought you were trying to help us. That keycard got you interested in Panic Park, Byron said. That started you on your way here. You should feel flattered. My friend Byron is the one who chose you all, the menace announced. Why? Matt demanded. Why us? Byron crossed his furry purple arms in front of his chest. I chose you because you all proved you were brave when you defeated those villains back home, he said. You need to be brave to survive what the menace has waiting for you. We tried the fear meter with other kids, the menace said, and, well, why go into the messy details? Let's just say it wasn't pretty. Why do you need us to be brave? Matt demanded. What are you going to do with us? I cried. Why do you want to frighten us? Sabrina asked in a tiny voice. The menace thumped his gloved hands on the podium. Good questions, gang, he said. Keep thinking. Try to think of the most frightening moments of your lives. That will be a start. Then he leaned over the podium, his face still hidden in shadow. You brighter ones may have noticed that this park is stuck in 1974, he said. There was great fear in the park then. So much fear it spun us into another reality. It stuck us in time. Luke grabbed my hand. Is he serious? He whispered. Your fear will bring us back, the menace continued. The energy from your fear will return Panic Park to its place in the real world. I don't understand, I stammered. How long are you going to keep us here? I asked. For as long as it takes, the menace replied. He turned to the fear meter. I tried other kids, he said, but they weren't brave enough to survive the terror. Byron says you have proven your bravery. We'll see. A grin spread over Byron's face. Be afraid, he said. Be very afraid. Without warning, the menace grabbed the brim of his hat and lifted it off his head. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at his face, seeing it for the first time. Cold, dark eyes ringed with black circles. A pencil-thin mustache beneath his pointed nose. Deep lines down his cheeks. A cold sneer on his lips. How do you plan to frighten us? Matt cried. Tell us. Hey, buddy boy, you don't ask the questions around here, the menace boomed. I do. No, I do. A loud, shrill voice cried. I ask the questions. The menace's head spun around and screamed. We all screamed. The menace had another face on the back of his head. Chapter 6. My scream echoed off the high walls. I couldn't take much more of this. I turned to run, but the shadow people were at the door, blocking any escape. When our screams died down, the menace's other face spoke up. Keep it up. What a delicious sound. Yes, yes, I love those screams of horror. Love them to death. This face had a high nasal voice and glowing red skin as if it were burning, on fire. The eyes were wild, big, and rolling crazily. Beneath its flaring bulb of a nose, I saw full lips over crooked teeth. The menace had a dark face, and a face the color of flames. Love it, keep screaming, the red face cried. And then the menace turned around again, and the first face spoke up in its low, deep voice. As you can see, I'm not timid. I will do anything. I have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Stop bragging. They get the idea, the second face snapped. I'm not bragging, the first face insisted. I'm telling them what they need to know. He raised two gloved fingers. As you can see, I have you kids outnumbered 2-1. And 2 heads are better than 1, the red face declared. You guys are going to bring my park back to the real world, the dark face said, by the power of your terrified screams. He turned to Byron, standing by the tall wooden piece of furniture. Start up the fear meter, he ordered. Byron reached into the back of the box. I heard a click. Then the machine started to hum. Byron turned it so we could see the narrow tube on the front. It looked a little like a thermometer. The fear meter hummed for a while. The hum grew louder, and I saw a red line climb from the bottom. Yes, it was exactly like a thermometer. It had numbers etched on the side, from 1 to 100. We all watched in silence as the red line slid up, until it stopped at 20. Oh no, the menace groaned. People, you must do much better than this. You're just not trying, guys. Your fear has got to hit 100. His head spun around, and the red face spoke up. I'll bet we can find something juicy to get that fear climbing. He waved a gloved hand. The shadow people began to move. They floated silently across the room. They surrounded us. I could feel the icy cold rolling off them. I started to shiver. I couldn't see. They floated over us like a black cloud. I felt a cold force, a pressure like powerful wind pushing me one way, then the other. Luke, I called to my brother. My voice was muffled under the thick blanket of shadows. Luke, are you okay? No reply. I felt sick. My stomach felt tight and heavy. I kept picturing the menace and his 2 faces. 2 faces on one head. How did he do that to himself? Was that part of his plan to frighten us? Suddenly, the shadows lifted. Light poured over me. I stood with the other kids, shivering from the cold. Luke huddled beside me, his teeth chattering. I raised my eyes to the stage. The red line on the fear meter had risen to 25. If this is how frightened we feel at 25, how will we survive fear that reaches 50 or 100? I turned to the menace. Why won't you answer our questions? I asked. Why won't you tell us what you plan to do with us? His dark eyes peered down at me. You will help me get Panic Park out of 1974, he said. You will. His other face spun around. Don't tell them, he cried. Just show them. He pushed a button on the podium. I screamed as the floor dropped away. I fell hard and fast. I saw the others falling beside me. My hands flew up as I dropped straight down, screaming all the way. Chapter 7. I landed hard on my elbows and knees. Pain shot through my body. I let out another cry as someone landed on top of me. My face sank into a deep carpet. Groaning, I raised my head and glanced around. We had all landed in a pile, a tangle of arms and legs and bodies. Groaning, I scrambled to my knees. My neck throbbed. My back ached. My heart was fluttering. I took a deep breath and held it. You're okay, Lizzie. You're okay. At least we landed on a soft, thick rug. Someone grabbed my hand. Matt. He tugged me to my feet. I saw my brother Luke still on his knees. He shook his head, dazed. I helped pull him up. Then I helped some other kids. No one spoke. We had fallen to the floor below, but everyone seemed to be okay. I glanced around the large room. I saw rows of black seats. A gray curtain at the front of the room began to slide open. I could see a movie screen behind it, a screening room. Seats, everyone, the deep voice of the menace rang out from a loudspeaker beside the screen. Take your seats. The movie is about to begin. And then I heard the menace's high, shrill voice. So sorry there's no popcorn, but you probably won't mind. I don't think you'll be too hungry after you see this movie. Ha 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 ha. What an ugly laugh. My legs were shaking. My stomach felt tight, as if I'd swallowed a heavy rock. Luke and I walked together. We took seats in the second row. I sank into the chair. It felt warm and soft. It was furry. I started to lower my hands to the chair arms, but the arms moved. The chair arms lifted up and wrapped themselves tightly around my waist. I started to struggle, but something made me stop. I went limp and listened hard. Yes, I could hear the chair breathing. I could feel it pulsing all around me. The chair was alive, warm and breathing and alive. Its arms held me down. I sank into the moist fur. It smelled like my dog when she needs a bath. It's a living creature, Luke whispered. Lizzie, this is too creepy. Enjoy the film, everyone, the menace boomed. A little history lesson, and also a preview of some of the horrible things that I have planned for you. The red face spoke up. And people, please don't close your eyes during the scary parts. The fear meter is running. You know what that means. We need you to be afraid every moment. You can do it, guys. I know you can. The ceiling lights faded. My chair let out a soft growl. I could feel its heart pulsing steadily. Another chair growled. I turned to Luke. Even in the darkness, I could see the fear on his face. Carly Beth and Sabrina sat in front of us. Carly Beth's chair had its arms wrapped over her arms. She couldn't move. The movie started, black and white like everything in Panic Park. It focused slowly. I saw a roller coaster. The sound came on. Kids on the roller coaster screaming and laughing. The camera was in a roller coaster car. The car roared up a steep climb, picking up speed. And as I watched it rise, my chair took off. I felt it shoot up off the floor, growling softly. It floated higher, picking up speed, higher toward the dark ceiling of the theater. Was this one of those fake rides where your chair jerks you all around and you pretend you're flying? No, we were all really up in the air. I could see the floor far below. I screamed as the chair tilted one way, then the other. I saw what was happening. Our chairs were all tilting with the kids in the movie coaster. I tilted back. The arms gripped me tighter. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The chairs all tilted down and sank fast. Our screams joined the screams of the kids in the movie. My chair twisted one way, then the other, and then with a whoosh, it lifted me up again. I flew high, then came roaring down, squealing down, shooting down, bumping and bucking. I felt the chair's heart pounding with mine, felt its furry arms tighten. listened to its soft growl. And as I stared helplessly at the screen, the coaster car in the movie went flying off the tracks. Kids on the screen squealed in horror, and I opened my mouth in a terrified wail as my chair went flying out of control across the theater. Chapter 8. Oh no, oh no. I heard a sickening crash in the movie. My flying chair had spun the wrong way. I couldn't see the movie screen, but I pictured those poor kids, pictured them crashing to the ground. And then my chair started to spin. It whirled faster like a top. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, my chair was back on the floor. In the second row behind Carly, Beth, and Sabrina, I tried to shake off my dizziness. The two girls were trembling too. The movie screen went gray. The voice of the menace boomed through the loudspeakers. Well, we went off the tracks there. I hate when that happens, don't you? He laughed. His red face chimed in. That was the beginning of it all, back in 1974. Things started to go wrong in the park. We lost a few kids that day. Big whoop, right? Win a few, lose a few. The movie began again. It showed a tall, narrow stone tower. The tower stretched high above the park. A sign in front read, Tower to Nowhere. The camera moved inside the tower. People were climbing stone stairs. The stairs wound around and around. As I watched them climb, the air in the theater grew warmer. People leaned forward as they climbed. The steps grew steeper. The people climbed in small circles. The tower seemed to grow even more narrow. The air grew hotter, hot and wet, so hot my nostrils started to burn. Drops of sweat ran down my forehead. It's hard to breathe, Luke whispered beside me. Yes, the air was suffocating. My face burned from the stifling hot air. I began breathing through my mouth. My deep breaths made my chest burn too. In the movie, people kept climbing, jammed together. They kept circling the tower, trudging higher. The screen went gray again. A spotlight flashed at the side of the screen. The menace stood behind a small podium. His hat rested on the podium shelf. His dark face peered out at us. More annoying problems for Panic Park that year, he said. People climbed to the top of the Tower of Nowhere and never came back down. We got into a little trouble for that. He sighed. No one understood me. My experiments with the outer limits of fear became more and more brilliant, but no one appreciated me. His head spun around, and his second face snapped at him. You think you were so brilliant? You were brilliant like an ox. I told you the Tower of Nowhere was an awful idea, but did you listen to me? The head spun around. Shut up, the dark face barked. Shut up, shut up. When I want your opinion, I'll rattle your cage. The head spun again. You're not too big to slap. Who's going to do it? You? Please don't make me laugh. I've got chapped lips. Think I can't give you a slap that'll set your head spinning? Go ahead, see who it hurts. Imprisoned in the chair, I sat staring at the two faces as the two faces argued. I couldn't move, could hardly breathe. The man is a monster, I told myself. Look at him, fighting with his second face, a monster. Did he do that to himself? Give himself a second face in his experiments in fear? He will do anything, anything. How can we survive a total monster? The spotlight went out. The movie started again. I saw a white building. A sign above the entrance read, Ride the Whirlwind. The camera went inside, dark at first, and then the picture brightened, and I saw people in a long tunnel, people being blown off their feet, lifted by a powerful roaring wind. A boy flew across the screen. His shirt had blown over his head. A girl held onto his leg as the wind carried them down the tunnel. Her hair blew high above her head. They were both screaming in horror, helpless in the powerful, raging wind. And then I felt a burst of cold wind brush my face. Another strong gust blew my hair up high on my head. A swirling wind blew through the movie theater. Some kids screamed as the wind pressed us back into our living seats, pushed against us as if trying to blow us away. Can't breathe, the words escaped my throat. And then I heard kids screaming all around me. I can't breathe. Stop it. Please stop it. Turn it off. Can't you turn it off? Experience the whirlwind, the menace screamed from beside the screen. I could hear people shrieking and wailing in the movie, but I couldn't see them. My eyes were shut tight against the roaring wind. Experience the whirlwind, the menace repeated. He laughed his cold laugh. Live it. Live it. My chest was about to burst. I couldn't suck air in or out. The raging waves of wind were too powerful. And then I heard the menace's other face shout, Stop it, you fool! You've gone too far! You're going to kill them all! Chapter 9. The wind stopped. Gasping for air, I pressed my hands to my frozen cheeks. Then I tried to smooth my hair down. I could still hear the roar of the wind gusts, rising and falling like the ambulance sirens in my ears. I took a long breath and let it out slowly. "Were you watching the film?" the menace demanded. "Did you see those people struggling against the winds? They were terrified. It was beautiful. What a beautiful sight." The chair pulsed around me. I could feel its heartbeat against my back. Thinking about it gave me the shivers. "When people stumbled from the whirlwind," the menace continued, "their brains were a little scrambled," he sneered. "Big deal, right?" His head spun, and the bright red face spoke up. "You went too far. You turned their brains to mush." "And what's your excuse?" the dark face snapped. Okay, maybe my experiments with fear and reality went too far. Something went wrong, guys. The fear level in the park was so high it hurled us into another reality." He sighed. "Yes, I closed Panic Park, and then my beautiful park went spinning away, whirling away to a parallel universe. The world moved on, the years passed, but we stayed in 1974. He picked up his hat and twirled it in his hands. "I loved it at first," he said. "It gave me time to do more experiments in fear. My experiments were brilliant. I learned the true path to terror." The head spun. "A lot of people disappeared because of you," the red face said. "A lot of people became shadows." The first face spun back. "You can't make chicken soup without breaking a few chickens," he boomed. "My experiments in fear were exciting, but I got bored. I decided I wanted to return to the real world." He kept twirling the wide-brimmed hat between his gloved hands. "How to get back? I began studying the problem, and guess what, people? I discovered that Horrorland Park was built on the same spot where Panic Park had stood. I discovered I could use mirrors to travel back and forth between Panic Park and Horrorland. I could travel to Horrorland through even the tiniest mirror. It was an amazing discovery, but then I had a little accident." "Is that what you call me?" the red face screamed. "An accident?" Shut up, the first face cried. He turned back to us. "I was doing an experiment with a two-way mirror. The experiment went wrong, and I ended up with that ugly face attached to my head." "You're not winning any beauty prizes," the other face said. "Come on, people. Check out my blue eyes, my adorable blonde eyebrows. Let's vote on which of us has the prettiest face." I looked down the row of kids. No one moved. We were trapped in the pulsing living chairs, staring in silent horror at this insane monster with two faces. "Now I need your help, people," the menace said. "I need your fear level to go so high that Panic Park returns to its place in the real world. Fear brought us here, and fear will bring us back." Michael sat at the end of my row. I could see the anger burning in his eyes. Finally, he spoke up. "No way," he shouted, swiping his fist at the menace. "No way we'll help you." We all started shouting at once. "No way," Matt shouted. "No way, no way. Let us go," I cried. The menace waved a hand in the air, and I felt my chair arms tighten around my waist. The arms raised themselves to my throat and began to choke off my breath. Choking, gasping for air, I grabbed the chair arms and struggled to pull them off me. The menace waved his hand again, and the chair arms sank back to my sides. "Save your voices for screaming," the menace cried. He turned to the side of the stage. Byron appeared, pushing the tall fear meter in front of him. "The meter is still only at 25, the menace said. "You people aren't trying." "Only 25? I thought. We'll never survive what he has in mind." More fear, the red face shouted. "I get all tingly just thinking about it." His words sent a chilling jolt of fear over the room. The fear meter needle jumped a little. We were all afraid, because we knew he was serious and crazy. "Keep your eyes on the fear meter, guys," Byron chimed in. His big hand thumped the side of it. "We're going to get that red needle up to the top." Chapter 10. Byron led us up a long staircase, then down a winding dark hall and up another steep staircase. The windows were caked with dust and thick layers of dirt. Almost no light seeped in. Rows of grinning skulls gazed up at us. Embroidered in the black carpet. Tangles of cobwebs dangled from the ceilings, brushing our faces as we passed by. Low moans followed us down one hallway. Were those human sounds? I shuddered and stayed close to Luke. We walked in silence. I knew we were all thinking the same thought. Will we ever get out of this terrifying old mansion alive? Door after door revealed only darkness. One wall was filled from top to bottom with hideous grinning animal heads. Another wall had a collection of thin rubbery things nailed to it. They looked like human tongues. My stomach heaved. I turned away from the ugly sight. We climbed another endless stairway. Then Byron led us into the bright light of a huge room. My eyes adjusted slowly. When I could focus, I saw wooden tables and chairs, several rows of bunk beds against one wall, a bathroom, 2 long wooden benches under narrow, dirt-stained windows. A brick fireplace took up one wall. I squinted hard. Were those bones piled on the fireplace floor? An enormous painting of the menace in the flowery silver frame stared at us from above the fireplace. His hat was pulled over one eye. The other eye glared coldly. The rest of his face was lost in shadow. I shuddered. A fear meter stood against the wall to the right of the bunk beds. "This is your room," Byron said. "Make yourselves at home." "Is there room service?" Matt joked. He always put on a brave face. "Yes," Byron replied, "and a maid will come to turn down your beds and leave chocolates on your pillows at night." He laughed. "What's wrong? No one else is laughing? I don't blame you." "Byron, how could you work for that creep?" Carly Beth demanded. Byron shrugged. "It's not a bad job," he said, "especially if you like to see kids scream and cry, and think how powerful I'll be when Panic Park returns to the real world." He shook his head. "Good luck, guys. You're going to need it." He disappeared out the door. 2 seconds later, he was back. He came striding up to Matt with his paw outstretched. "Give it back," Byron said. Matt stared at him. "Excuse me?" "Give me back the key card I gave you when you first arrived at Horrorland. That card got you into all these locked places." "No way I'm giving it to you," Matt said. He took a step back. "Why did you give it to me?" A smile spread over the horror's fur-colored face. "Why? I told you, to make you start thinking about Panic Park," Byron said. "You know, a little clue to get you interested." Byron waved his paw in front of Matt's face. "Give it back, now." Matt sneered at him. "No way, furball." An ugly roar escaped Byron's throat. "Tough talk, Matt, my lad," he growled. His eyes turned fiery red. He balled his big paws into tight fists. "Don't you know I can tear you in two?" Matt tried to dance out of his path, but the big horror lunged forward. He grabbed Matt by the front of his t-shirt. "Give the card back," he snarled. Matt shoved Byron's paws away. "I lost it," he said. "I don't have it. I lost the stupid card." Byron's fiery eyes locked on Matt. "Oh, really?" He grabbed Matt again, wrapped his paws around Matt's waist, and lifted him off the floor. "Let's see if you lost it," Byron rasped. "I hope you're not lying to me, Matty boy." "You heard me," Matt shouted, but his voice trembled. "I lost it, really." "Let's see what falls out of your pockets," Byron said. Then he flipped Matt sideways like he was a baton and twirled him. "Hey!" Matt let out a sharp groan. Byron held him by the ankles and started to shake him up and down. Matt's face turned red. His eyes bulged. Byron shook him harder, shook him as if he were trying to get salt out of a salt shaker. "Let's see what you've got, boy," Byron said. "Let's see what tumbles out of these jean pockets." He shook Matt harder. "Oh," Matt uttered a long, low moan. "Let go of him," Carly Beth cried. "Stop it." She grabbed Byron's thick paw and tried to pull it off Matt. She wasn't strong enough to budge him. Michael and Boone dove at Byron. They grabbed him around the waist and tried to wrestle him down. But Byron gave one hard shake of his body, and both boys went flying to the floor. Matt groaned again. His voice vibrated as Byron shook him even harder. Matt shut his eyes. "Where is it? Where is it?" Byron demanded. "I can shake your brains loose, boy. This isn't a joke. Where is that card?" Carly Beth leaned down to Matt. "Give it to him," she screeched. "Matt, listen to me. Please, give him the card. Make him stop." Matt's face was tomato red. His eyes were shut. His tongue flapped out of his mouth. Byron shook him harder. Panic tightened my throat. "Stop it, I choked out. "Stop it." The big horror slammed Matt's head into the floor. Matt's eyes rolled up into his head. Ignoring our cries, Byron shook him some more. Chapter 11. Whoa! Matt let out a long groan. He opened his eyes. "Okay." His voice came out in a whisper. Okay, you win." Byron gave him one last shake, then he set him down on his back and let go of Matt's ankles. Matt lay sprawled on the floor for a long moment. Finally, he stretched his arms, then his back. He raised his head slowly, blinking hard. "So dizzy," he murmured. He pressed both hands to his forehead. Ow, what a headache. Abby and Julie dropped beside him. Can you stand up? Julie asked. Stop stalling, Byron snapped. He gave Matt a kick in the ankle. Move it. The two girls helped pull Matt to his feet. Matt's eyes were still rolling in his head. He leaned on Abby as he reached into his jeans pocket. Okay, here, he said. He pulled the gray card from his pocket. Byron snatched it from his hand. He ripped it into 2 pieces and tossed the pieces to the floor. He grinned at Matt. Man, you gave up easy, he said. I thought you'd put up a better fight than that. Ever think of changing your name to Wimp? Matt rubbed his head. Give me a break, he muttered angrily. Byron laughed. You guys will have to be tougher than that if you plan to survive Panic Park. Chuckling to himself, he stomped out of the room and slammed the door hard behind him. Matt staggered to one of the long benches and sat down, rubbing his head some more. The rest of us gathered in front of him. Do you believe that guy? Matt muttered. I'd like to shake him, make his fur fly. Billy Deep moved beside me. I could barely see him. His body was made of smoke. It billowed as he moved. His eyes peered out from the shadow. I don't feel so well, he told his sister Sheena. His voice sounded soft and far away. I feel so cold, Sheena. I can't feel my hands or my feet. We'll get you back to normal, Sheena told him. She looked away. I hope. We made a terrible mistake, Julie said, tugging at the ends of her hair. We were so desperate to escape Horrorland and get to Panic Park. But it was all just a trap. Michael stepped up beside Matt's bench and turned to face us. His expression was angry. He was breathing hard. Okay. Now we know about Jillian and Jackson, he said, and Byron. Who else is a spy for the Menace? His eyes moved slowly from face to face. We trusted those 3, he said, and they were traitors. Who else is a traitor? Who else is working for the Menace? He raised a fist. Who else? Then he stepped up to me and bumped me back with his chest. Who else is a spy? He shouted angrily. Michael, stop, I pleaded. He bumped me again with his chest, forcing me back. Who else? Who else, Lizzie? How about you and your brother? How about it? Chapter 12. No, please, I choked out. Michael bumped me again. Leave her alone, Luke shouted. We're not spies. Michael spun around and leaned over Luke. We don't know you, he shouted. You're not special guests. You arrived just in time to follow us to Panic Park. Boone stepped up beside Michael. He scowled at me. Michael's right. Why are you and your brother here? You're working for the Menace, aren't you? You're wrong, I screamed. I shoved Michael back. You're wrong about Luke and me. We're the ones who tried to warn you, remember? They stared at me. Michael lowered his fists. I tried to warn you about Panic Park, I said. I said we should all stay in Horrorland, but then Jillian pretended to read my mind, remember? She said I was lying. Luke chimed in. Now we all know who was lying. It was Jillian. So leave my sister alone. Michael angrily gazed around the room. Who else is a spy? Who else is a traitor? Carly Beth grabbed him by the shoulders. Michael, listen to me, she said softly, calmly. We're in terrible danger. We have to trust each other. She's right, her friend Sabrina said. We can't stand here arguing and turning on each other. We have to get out of here. Michael grumbled to himself. Then he let out a sigh and dropped beside Matt on the bench. We're in a horrible jam, Carly Beth said. If we survive the Menace's scares, he wins. Panic Park returns to the real world. Imagine the terrible things he could do then. But what choice do we have, Robbie asked. Not to survive? If we survive, we help him, I said. And if we don't survive, we're dead. There's one more choice, Matt said. We get out of here. He jumped to his feet. If we escape Panic Park, the Menace loses, he said. He pointed to the fear meter against the wall. If we can get ourselves back to Horrorland before that meter hits 100, the Menace loses big time. His park is stuck here in 1974. But how? Sheena asked in a trembling voice. How can we escape? Look at my brother. Billy is a shadow. If the Menace can do something like that to us, how can we ever hope to escape? Matt is totally right, Michael said, jumping up. So the Menace is powerful and evil and crazy. That doesn't mean we just sit here and wait for him to terrify us. We've got to act. Matt bolted toward the door. Let's go. It's probably locked, Carly Beth said, and the Menace is probably listening to every word we say. We've got to try, Matt said. We trotted after him. He grabbed the brass doorknob, twisted it, and pulled it. The door swung open. Not locked, Carly Beth cried. Did Byron forget? Or is it a trap? Julie asked. Her words sent a chill down my back, but I knew we didn't have a choice. Matt stepped out into the hall. I took a deep breath and followed him. Chapter 13. The long, dark hall stretched both ways. The skulls stitched in the carpet stared up at us. The dirt-caked windows let in an inky gray light. The air was hot and smelled musty and sour. We didn't walk, we ran. Our shoes thudded on the thick carpet. We hurtled down one long hall, turned, and ran down another. We're up high, Michael said breathlessly. We have to find a stairway down to the first floor. We turned another corner. No sign of any stairs. We ran past a tall mirror, cracked down the middle. I pressed my hand against the glass. It was hard, not an escape route. Oh, wow, Carly Beth muttered from up ahead. I followed her gaze. A TV monitor hung from the ceiling. It showed the fear meter. The red line had climbed to 40. The bracelet on my wrist was tingling. I felt it grow warm against my skin. We have to stay calm, I said. We can't let our fear level climb. Stay calm? Abby cried. Are you crazy? Matt gave her a gentle push. Keep moving, he said. Don't look at any TV monitors. Don't pay any attention to that meter. Just keep going. Matt led the way. He started to jog again. Down another long, straight hall. A black cat sat hunched in the middle of the carpet. No, not a black cat. As I trotted closer, I saw that it was a shadow cat. It floated just above the carpet, gray eyes peering out at us. It uttered a sad meow as we ran past. At the end of the hall, I saw 2 shiny doors. A dead end, Carly Beth gasped. We have to go back. No, wait, Matt said. Check it out. He pointed to a button at the side of the 2 doors. It's an elevator. It'll take us down, Boone said. He wiped sweat off his forehead with the sleeve of his t-shirt. Maybe it'll take us to the basement, and we can sneak out. We stared at the shiny double doors in silence. Matt pushed the button. Once, twice. The doors slid open. We stared into the elevator car. It was narrow and deep. The walls were solid black. A single light bulb cast a triangle of dim light from the low ceiling. We jammed into it, all 16 of us. The car rocked a little under our weight. We pressed together, too nervous to speak. The doors squeaked as they slid shut. As the doors slammed together, the light went out. Oh no, I cried. My heart skipped a beat. Kids groaned and gasped. Total darkness. Not much air in here, Julie said behind me. It's getting hot already. Lizzie, you're in front, Abby said. Push the button. I stabbed my hand forward and hit the wall. I ran my hand up and down beside the door. Push it, Boone called. It's getting really hard to breathe. I can't find it, I said. I slid my palm over the elevator door. I tried the wall on the other side of the doors. I began groping the wall frantically. I can't find it. I can't find it. There has to be a down button, Abby said. I don't like this. I don't like this closed-in space. I feel sick. Please. Open the doors, Sheena cried. Let's just get out of this thing. Please, I'm going to be sick, Abby moaned. Luke was pressed beside me. In the darkness, he began feeling the wall, searching for a button. I slid my hands over the doors. I searched everywhere. There's no button, I said. No way to move. No way to get out. Are we trapped in here? Abby's voice cracked. She reached over me and started to pound the door with both fists. No, let us out. Somebody, let us out. Chapter 14. Shouting frantically, Abby pounded the door. I gasped as the elevator bumped, then started to go down. Then I let out a startled cry as the floor seemed to drop away from under me. I stumbled back against Carly Beth and Sabrina. Kids screamed. We were rocked from side to side. The elevator whirred as it dropped faster, faster. I felt my ears pop. We were dropping, sinking like a stone, too fast, falling hard, harder. We're going to crash, Sabrina shrieked in my ear. I squeezed Luke's shoulder. Was that me screaming? I shut my eyes. My ears popped again. My knees folded. I held my breath and waited for the pain of the crash. The elevator hit the bottom with a deafening thud. The car rocked hard, bounced up, then slammed down again. I screamed as the force of the fall dropped me to my knees. Kids were groaning and crying. Ow! Someone's elbow slammed into my back. I toppled forward. The car rocked hard, bounced up, then slammed down again. I screamed as the force of the fall dropped me to my knees. Kids were groaning and crying. Ow! Someone's elbow slammed into my back. I toppled forward. The light flashed back on. At least we're alive, Robbie groaned from the back of the car. We quickly scrambled to our feet. My back hurt. I was breathing hard. Open the doors, Abby said. Please, hurry. I'm going to puke. I slammed the doors with my open hands. Squinting in the dim light, I searched again for the elevator button. I couldn't find anything. Let me try, Michael said, pushing to the front. He balled his fists and pounded with his monster strength. The doors didn't budge. It's getting so hot in here, Boone said. I feel dizzy, kind of faint. Billy spoke up. I'm just a shadow. Maybe I can slip through a crack and open it from the outside. He floated like a cloud to the front. Michael stepped out of the way, stumbling over Sabrina. Billy floated to the top of the doors, then slowly down again. No crack, he said softly. No opening anywhere for me to slip through. Matt raised one hand in the air to get attention. My bracelet is vibrating, he said. We have to stay calm. We don't want the fear meter to shoot up. Calm? How can we stay calm? Julie cried. I don't believe we're trapped in a stupid elevator, Michael shouted. He slammed the wall with his fists, and a metal panel fell off the wall. It revealed a hidden slot. A slot for a key card, Matt exclaimed. Move out of the way, Lizzie. I'll try my card. I gasped. But you gave it to Byron. We all saw you. Oh, yeah, for sure, Matt replied, rolling his eyes. Are you kidding me? I gave him my library card from back home. The big jerk never even looked at it. He tugged the key card from his jeans pocket. He raised it to the slot and slid it in. Nothing happened. Chapter 15. I felt my stomach tighten. I stared at the elevator doors. No one spoke. Every second seemed like an hour. Finally, I heard a soft hum, and the doors slid open. Some kids cheered. I started to laugh. Crazy, tense laughter. I darted out of the elevator. Luke nearly tripped me, stumbling out beside me. We all bolted out of there as fast as we could. Where were we? I gazed around. We were outside. Staring into the gray sunlight, standing in the shadow of the back wall of the Menace's mansion. Let's go, Matt said. He didn't have to say any more. We all took off running. We were desperate to get as far away from the mansion as we could. We ran back into the park, which was as grim and gray as before. I could see the Ferris wheel in the distance, black against the gray sky. We ran past dead, empty shops, silent rides, abandoned food carts. Where are we going? Carly Beth asked. We need a plan. Before anyone could answer her, a shadow person floated in front of us. She was so gray and misty, it took me a few seconds to recognize her. The little girl. The sad little girl shadow we'd seen when we arrived. She held both hands up to Carly Beth. Find me, she said in a tiny whisper I could barely hear. Can you find me? Can you find me? Carly Beth let out a sigh. She reached for the girl. She tried to wrap her arms around her and hug her. Can you find me? The little girl cried. Another shadow appeared. Another little girl. Can you find me too? Do you know where I am? Can you hug me too? Can you hug me too? Another shadow floated next to her, and then 4 or 5 more shadows swept around Carly Beth. A hug, a hug, a hug, they all whispered. Frightened, Carly Beth staggered back. No, please, she started. But the shadow people swarmed over her. A hug, a hug, a hug. Carly Beth, I called to her. I couldn't see her. She was buried behind the whispering shadows. Can you find me? Can you find me? A hug, please, a hug. They covered her in a curtain of heavy shade. I froze, staring at the swarming shadows, all chanting and pleading so sadly. And then Carly Beth's scream rose over the muffled voices. Help me! Help me! Get them off me! They're smothering me! Chapter 16. I froze. Carly Beth screamed again. As I stared in horror, Matt, Robbie, and Sheena leaped at the shadows. They struggled to pull them off her. A hug, a hug, a hug. The shadows' frightening chant didn't stop. The 3 kids swiped frantically at the shadows, struggling to pull them off Carly Beth. But it was like trying to grab clouds. Their hands sank into the shadows and slid right through them. Matt, Robbie, and Sheena stepped back, shaking their heads. Still chanting, the shadows finally drifted away. The little girl was the last to leave. She tossed back her head and let out an ugly cackle. Then she floated away too, and I screamed, "Oh no!" Carly Beth floated darkly in front of our horrified eyes, a shadow, Carly Beth was lost in shadow, a shadow person too. She raised her hands and stared at them. "Oh, no," she murmured. "Oh, please, no." Billy floated to her side. They stood together, two gray shadows. "We'll be okay," he said. His voice seemed to come from far away. "We'll be okay, Carly Beth, when we get out of this park." And then he added in a tiny voice, "I hope." Inside her misty cloud, we could see her shadowy body trembling. Her head was down. "I feel so light and faint," she said. "I can't see you too well. It's like you're all standing in a thick fog." "It's very cold," Billy said. "I can never warm up, but we'll be okay." Carly Beth tried to rub her hands. "I can't feel my skin." She let out a sob. "I can't feel my skin." Sabrina stepped up close to Carly Beth. "You fought evil before," she told her. "You defeated the haunted mask, Carly Beth. You can defeat this too." Carly Beth didn't answer. She just kept rubbing her arms. Smoke rubbing smoke. "Hey!" Robbie suddenly cried out. He was staring at Brittany and Molly. "I just remembered something," he said. They turned to him. Brittany and Molly looked like sisters. They both had coppery hair and brown eyes. Molly was taller and more serious, like an older sister. You remembered something about us?" Brittany asked. Robbie nodded. "You two already made the trip from Panic Park to Horrorland," he said. "Don't you remember? You came to the game arcade. I was in trouble there." Brittany scrunched up her face, thinking hard. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I kind of remember." "You came back to Horrorland," Robbie said. "You tried to get me to come with you, to Panic Park." Yes, we did," Molly said. "My memory. It's weird. It seems like it happened a long time ago." "Well, how did you do it?" Robbie demanded. "Think hard. You've got to remember. How did you get out of Panic Park? How did you get to Horrorland that night?" The two girls stared at each other. I could see they were concentrating, trying to remember. "That's so weird," Brittany muttered. "I don't remember." "I can't remember either," Molly said, shaking her head. "How did we get back to Horrorland?" "Keep thinking," Robbie urged. "Come on, you can do it. You can remember." I remember it was very windy," Brittany said. "Windy?" Molly said. "Yes, I think you're right. I remember my hair blowing all over. I had to shut my eyes. Yes, it was windy." "I remember we walked through a building," Brittany said, thinking hard. "A white building, like that one over there, maybe." She pointed. We all turned and gazed at a low white building with a flat black roof. It had a dark window beside an open door. I didn't see any sign in front. Nothing to tell what was inside. "Yes, it looked just like that," Brittany said. "I think." "Should we check it out?" Robbie asked. No one answered. We were already walking toward the building. We stopped outside the open door, dark inside. Too dark to see what was in there. "It's like a little house," Matt said. He frowned. "Why would there be a little house in the middle of Panic Park?" "Are you sure the building you used to escape looked like this?" Robbie asked Brittany and Molly. Brittany scrunched up her face again. I think so," she stammered. Molly nodded. "It's so hard to remember. Maybe the menace messed up our memories." "Let's go in," Michael said. He didn't wait for anyone to argue. He stepped into the doorway and strode into the building. The rest of us followed close behind him. "It's a waiting room," I said as soon as my eyes adjusted to the dim light. I saw a few chairs, a couch, a table with a stack of magazines, a reception counter behind a glass window, a doctor's waiting room. A thick layer of dust covered everything. I picked up some magazines from the table. The pages were yellowed. The magazines were all from 1974. "Oh, yuck," Abby moaned. She was staring at a fish tank in the wall. The goldfish in the tank were just bones, skeletons floating on their sides. "No one has been here for years," Luke muttered. And then a voice shouted from the reception desk, "The doctor will see you now." "Huh?" A man in a totally weird superhero costume burst into the waiting room. "Oh no," Robbie cried. "It's Dr. Maniac." Chapter 17. You followed us from Horrorland?" Robbie cried. Dr. Maniac pushed back his leopard skin cape. He wore red and blue tights and a red and gold top. His gloves and boots were bright yellow. His eyes rolled crazily behind his red mask. "Did you really think you could escape the Keeper?" he cried. "Why are you here?" Robbie demanded. "Why did you follow us?" "Because I'm a maniac!" he exclaimed. He tossed back his head and laughed a shrill hyena laugh. Matt took 2 long strides toward Maniac. Leave us alone, he shouted. Maniac gave Matt a crooked grin. Which hand do you butter your bread with? He demanded. Excuse me? Matt squinted at him. Which hand do you butter your bread with, your left hand or your right hand? Dr. Maniac didn't wait for an answer. That's funny, he said. I don't use my hand. I use a butter knife. Again, he tilted his head back and uttered a long, high laugh. You're not funny, Robbie cried angrily. I created you. I drew you. You're a comic book character that I made up. I made you up, Maniac declared. If I shut my eyes, I can make you disappear. Ha! Tell us how to get out of this park, Matt demanded. Tell us what we have to do. Can you stand on your head and whistle Dixie with a mouthful of crackers? Maniac asked. Matt turned to Robbie. He isn't going to help us. Let's get out of here. Oh, but I am going to help you, Dr. Maniac said, moving to block the door. The leopard skin cape fluttered in front of him. He pushed it out of his way. He moved to the wall and opened a cabinet door. On the cabinet shelf stood a fear meter. The red line was just above 50. Tisk, tisk, the supervillain clucked. Look at that fear climb. You're halfway there. I'll bet all that fright is making you hungry and thirsty. Follow me. We're not following you. We're leaving, Matt cried. I went to the door with Matt, but we all stopped when we saw the shadow people, at least a dozen of them floating in the doorway, waiting for us. The room grew icy cold as they moved in, spreading their shadowy arms. They swarmed around us silently. I felt their icy touch on my skin, and then a thick curtain of darkness lowered over me. They were forcing us to move, forcing us to walk, holding us prisoner in their foggy grip. I shivered when the shadows pulled away. We were standing in front of a small diner. Through the window, I could see a long lunch counter with stools lining the front. A gray neon sign flickered over the glass door. The sign read, Shake Shack. The shadow people forced us inside. The door slammed shut behind us. I gazed around. The walls were covered with large posters of hamburgers and milkshakes in the tall glasses. Beneath his red mask, Dr. Maniac had a wide grin on his face. Everyone here? He shouted. Okay, enjoy your shakes. He moved to a lever near the door and pulled it down. I heard a low hum. The hum grew louder. Hey! I felt the floor lift up. No, wait, the whole restaurant was rising. Kids cried out as the walls started to vibrate. The floor shook, gently at first, then harder. The diner tilted hard to the left. Kids stumbled to the wall. Michael and Julie fell to the floor. I struggled to keep my balance. But the room rocked the other way, and then the whole diner started to shake. I screamed and tried to grab onto Luke, but we both fell to the floor. Before we could scramble up, the room tilted sharply, and we tumbled into the wall. I let out a cry as my arms smashed against the solid plaster. Pain shot up my arm, my neck. Kids were shrieking and crying out as the room shook harder. It's like an earthquake, Sabrina cried. She grabbed my shoulder. We tried to balance, but another jolt sent us crashing into Matt and Boone. I turned and saw Dr. Maniac floating calmly above the rattling, vibrating floor. Nothing like a good shake, he exclaimed. Then he laughed his ugly, shrill laugh. Ow! I let out another cry as Michael stumbled into me. We both slammed against the wall. I think I broke my arm, someone wailed. Stop, I'm so dizzy, Julie yelled. Another hard jolt, up, then down, and we bounced like rubber balls on the floor. My stomach lurched. I felt sick. I pressed my hand over my mouth, tried to force my stomach to stop heaving, and my head slammed against the wall again. I dropped to my knees. My knees bounced hard on the quaking floor. Stop it. Please, stop. That's the way the ball bounces, Maniac cried. Then he tossed his head back and giggled at the trembling ceiling. No! Boone screamed as his head rammed into the wall. He bounced on the floor, eyes shut in pain, holding his head. Shaking against the wall, Abby's knees buckled. She leaned over the floor and puked loudly. I staggered from side to side. Looking up, I saw Maniac's eyes on me. Oh! I felt a jolt from his hard stare, and I went flying backward. My head smacked the counter. Pain shot down my body. I saw stars. I actually saw stars. And then everything faded to black. Chapter 18. Lizzie, wake up. Wake up. I heard Luke's voice. It sounded very far away. Slowly, I opened my eyes, groaned from the pain. Luke was on his knees beside me. His hands were on my shoulders. "Are you okay?" I guess," my voice came out in a hoarse whisper. I sat up. Slowly, the room came back into focus. The shaking had stopped. Kids were sprawled everywhere. They looked dazed, in pain. Boone still had his hands pressed against the top of his head. Matt stood doubled over against the counter. Carly Beth and Billy hovered close together in the middle of the room. Still shadows, they had faded to a pale gray, like smoke from a dying campfire. Julie and Abby had their backs against the lunch counter. Both girls were trembling hard. Their knees quivered. Their arms were shaking. I could hear their teeth chattering. I can't stop shaking, Julie stammered. They both hugged themselves tightly, but their whole bodies trembled as if the room was still going crazy. Dr. Maniac laughed at them. "That's a really bad case of the shakes," he cried. His grin faded. "Don't worry, girls. If you die, you'll probably stop shaking after a few weeks in the grave." Abby moaned. She was trembling too hard to talk. Maniac laughed again. Robbie climbed unsteadily to his feet. He held his arms out, trying to balance. He stumbled toward Dr. Maniac. "I created you," Robbie shouted angrily. "I drew you in my comic strip, and I know how to destroy you." Dr. Maniac raised a long gloved finger and picked his nose with it. "That's what I think of your threat." "Help us get out of here," Robbie said. "Help us, and I'll let you live." Maniac picked his nose some more, his eyes on Robbie. "Think you're a big-deal comic book artist?" he said, sneering. He moved behind the lunch counter. "I'm an artist too, Robbie boy. Watch this." He pulled up a large paintbrush. He carried it over to Robbie. "I like to work with a brush," he said, "just like you. Watch an artist at work." He swept the brush over Robbie's face, and Robbie's face disappeared. I gasped as the maniac smoothed the brush over Robbie's neck, down the front of his chest. With each stroke, part of Robbie vanished. In a few seconds, the supervillain had brushed Robbie away. "How do you like my brushwork?" Dr. Maniac bellowed. "You taught me everything I know. Ha 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 ha." I stared in horrified silence, stared at the spot where Robbie had stood. I couldn't hold myself in. I screamed, "Robbie, are you there? Are you still there?" And then I turned to the grinning maniac and cried, "What have you done to him?" Chapter 19. Dr. Maniac didn't answer me. He stood there waving his paintbrush in the air. "Would anyone else like me to do their portrait?" he cried. He was staring right at me. The room grew silent. Maniac dropped the brush to the floor. He walked to the lunch counter. He bent over and pulled something out from behind it. A fear meter. My breath caught in my throat. The red line had risen to 75. Maniac gazed at the screen. "Very good," he muttered. "Good work, guys." He turned to us. "Lots of fear here in my little diner. I guess I've done my job well. Bye-bye, everyone." He tossed his cape behind him and hurried out the door. "Robbie, are you still here?" I tried again. "Can't you see me?" Robbie's voice suddenly sounded tinny, far away. "I'm here. Can't you see me?" Then he let out a moan of horror. "Oh, my hands. I can't see my hands. We stared in silence at the spot where the voice came from. Robbie wailed at the top of his voice. "What did he do to me? I can't see myself. What did he do to me?" "We can hear you," I told Robbie. "You're still here, but you're invisible. We'll get you back. I know we will." Carly Beth and Billy floated around the spot where Robbie stood. Their shadowy faces couldn't hide their fear. "Look at us," Matt cried. He waved his arm around the room. "Look at what the menace has done to us." I followed Matt's gaze. Robbie was invisible. Carly Beth and Billy were shades. Julie and Abby hugged themselves, unable to stop trembling. Boone shook his head. "I know we're all trying to be brave and tough it out," he said, "but maybe we won't survive. Maybe we're not going to make it." "We have to survive," I said. "The menace needs to keep us alive, remember?" "She's right," Sabrina agreed. "The menace wants to hit 100 on the fear meter, so he has to keep us alive. As long as we haven't reached 100 yet, he has no choice. He has to keep us alive." "Some of us," Robbie muttered. "Robbie, stop talking like that. We can't give up," Carly Beth said. "Our only chance is to get out of Panic Park." Matt helped Abby and Julie to their feet. They could barely stand. Their legs were wobbling so hard. Their teeth chattered. Hugging themselves, they took a few shaky steps. We made our way out of the Shake Shack. In the park, the sky was solid gray as always. The shadow people had disappeared. I didn't see anyone around. We started walking, keeping close together. We passed more empty shops, all dark and silent. A game room, a small park with withered, bare trees. Michael led the way. He stopped and pointed. "Another white building," he said. He turned to Brittany and Molly. "Could that be the one you escaped from?" The girls shook their heads. "Maybe." We walked closer. The building had a stained glass window, all shades of gray and black. The door was shaped like an arc. "It looks like a church or something," Luke said. "But that can't be right." A sign on the wall beside the door read, "What a shame." We stared at it, shaking our heads. What could that mean? Only one way to find out. We stepped through the arc into the open doorway. We were in another long, narrow room. Rows of wooden seats filled the center. Candles along both sides provided the only light. I heard solemn organ music from the far wall. It sounded like funeral music. The deep notes made the walls vibrate. "It is some kind of chapel," I whispered to Luke. "Weird." We stepped in farther to examine the walls. They were covered with photographs. The photos were all of kids about our age. Row after row of small framed photographs. Under each photo, a little tag had the kid's name. I read the names as I moved deeper into the chapel. April Smith, Travis Newton, Carlos Garcia, and under each name I saw the letters FTD. "Wow," Luke muttered from beside me. "None of these kids look too happy." "Why are there pictures on the wall?" I asked, "and what does FDT stand for?" Suddenly Sabrina gasped. The sound echoed through the narrow chapel. "What's wrong?" I asked. She was staring at a silver plaque on the wall next to the row of kids' photos. "Sabrina, what's wrong?" She pressed a hand to her mouth as she read the plaque. Then she turned to us. I see what FTD stands for," she stammered. "It isn't good."